Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Family Entrepreneur Life live show. Today's episode is a guest expert from our guest expert series. I have Tony Banta here today. Tony is an innovation consultant helping small business owners thrive in changing times. Beginning his career as a self-taught software developer, Tony quickly realized that the best code could never solve broader leadership issues within organizations. Today, Tony works exclusively with small business owners to help them implement the tools and tactics to continually stay ahead of shifts in technology, our economy, and culture. I'm your host, Ariana Sylvester, and Tony, welcome. Why don't you kind of fill in the gaps for some people and let us know a little bit more about you and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, Ariana. It's so great to be here with you guys. I've been following the stuff that you and Tom have done for a while, and I'm a huge fan. So I'm thrilled to be able to spend some time with you today.
So glad to hear it. So glad. We're thrilled to have you here. I'm so excited to hear your topic, your story.
Yeah, thanks. So, like you had mentioned in the intro, I started my career as a self-taught software developer about 14 years ago now. Time flies. And I always loved technology. I loved tinkering with things and making things better. And I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So both my mom and my stepfather, who I lived with, they each had businesses. And in the period of time when I was growing up, they started new businesses, and there was always new stuff going on. And so the time that I spent with them, a lot of it was time that I spent like hanging out at their offices or, going to work with them in the summers. And I loved those times because I got to see how they did what they did. I got to see how business worked. And so from my love of technology, I started to, look for ways that I could help in the family business, even as I was, pretty young. And so that sort of got me started in sort of my journey. I kind of knew from those experiences that I was going to have to be an entrepreneur, that I was never going to be thrilled working for someone else. And I've done that a handful of times in my career, and it always seems to sift out that I end up going off on my own at some point in time.
Yeah, it's funny because you and Tom are very similar. I think we've had this discussion before. He also started off as a software developer and had also had these like entrepreneurial tendencies from a very young age and decided that he could not live life working for someone else. So it's funny that, you guys are just so similar and have ended up in sort of a similar space. Today you're coming on and we kind of put the topic out there to everyone. And they decided they wanted to hear your story of failing in a family business and then starting all over again. So I'm a little excited because this is almost like a merging of our two series of the member stories and also the guest experts. So I'm excited. Go ahead. Let us hear the story.
And of course, when we put that out, they chose the one that requires me to be the most vulnerable. So. So here I thought that I could talk about new strategies and systematizing your business. That's the easy stuff, right?
Yeah.
But no, they want me to talk about the painful stuff.
Yep. So, hey, you put it out there. They voted for the vulnerability every time.
I sure did. So I'll sort of start with the first company that I started. So the first company that I started. I actually started from my college dorm room, and we were doing web development, software development, things like that. And that was sort of the story of my kind of start, of seeing how so many businesses, they thought that they wanted technology and they wanted solutions, but they really needed the leadership kind of tools to get them there before they could really be useful. And so I worked in that business for a number of years. It was a ton of fun. I got to work with some amazing clients, and I really learned so much. But over time, One of my clients at that point in time was a company that my mom had started. And she had started, it was a graphic design company that provided outsourced graphic design for the newspaper industry. So a lot of newspapers, magazines, publishers, they had started, reducing the staff that they had in-house and moving those sorts of those jobs overseas. And my mom came from a manufacturing background, and she hated to see these jobs leaving all of these small towns across the country. And so she tried to put a team together so that they could provide that service, but here in the United States. And so she needed some help to kind of build the systems and to do all of those things. And like I had said, they were a client of mine. And so it was sort of like a client that just kind of grew into a full-time job. They needed more and more help. So I started spending more and more time with them. Around that same point in time, I had some grandparents that got sick. So that sort of meant that I had to come back to the area where I grew up, which is sort of a small town in Pennsylvania. Lots of wonderful things about the town, but it's a small town USA. I was living in Miami at the time, so a big difference.
That's a big change.
And so, such a big change. So I, came back so that I could spend some time with them, and I was working in my mom's business. I still kept some clients, like some jobs on the side, but that was my full-time kind of thing. And, it was around 2008, 2009, 2010, when the entire landscape of the economy was so different than what some of us had been used to. And that sort of led to a lot of people making a lot of irrational decisions, cutting and running, and not like it was just a space of just so little predictability. And it was sort of that combined with, we never figured out the sales model that allowed us to scale. And so, even when we were big, we were at, like 50 to 60 employees at our height. It still wasn't large enough for us to kind of keep that momentum moving and to get the stability that we needed. And the stability and the efficiency, I should say. And so it was one of these things of, it was a great idea. We thought that it would be, easier to make sales than it was, and to figure out that model. Exactly. I see so many small business owners, the kinds that I work with today, who have made the same mistake. I was just on the phone with a startup last week, and they've been at this for 3 years, and they've burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they still haven't reached the benchmarks. Because if you're not in, if you can't figure out that model that lets you make decisions within it, it is very, very difficult to know when to keep investing and when to stop and kind of pivot and reanalyze where you're going.
Yeah, that pivot. That's Tom's favorite word.
Yeah, it's a good one. But so, as it sort of went with my family, we were working hard, and we sort of had a few blows that all kind of, happened one right after the other. We were cash flowing, we did have revenue. It just wasn't large enough for us to systematize and scale. And then, one of our largest clients sort of decided to make some changes, and they didn't renew a contract. Ooh. And then suddenly we were in the spot of having to, lay off team members and having to scramble. And it was just not something that was, that was working. And some of the family sort of side of things, which I know, you and Tom are so generous with how much you share of like the not so clean side of running a family business. Some of that for us was I was dealing with, or I was sort of in the business with my mom, who never was really struggling with getting over her father dying. And so she wasn't at her best, like she's someone who's like grown, several multi-million-dollar companies, and I love her so much, and I love the experience. And she was just struggling to, make the decisions that that would have come so easily to her, 3 or 4 years earlier. She was just not at her best, and I was, not very experienced. So, I was still green and, doing my best, but, making mistakes and sort of like feeling around for some of the leadership, footing. Some of those things that I could, very easily coach a client in was a lot harder to see in myself. That the pressure that I was kind of putting on myself, I was in not so great ways kind of putting that pressure on my team. And they were just not able to, perform at the unrealistic expectations that I had set for myself and them. So there were a bunch of great and really tough lessons in there.
It sounds like it. Oy, my goodness. So what ended up happening with that business? Did you keep going with it? Did you guys end up having to kind of close it out and do something else?
Yeah. So there's some of the struggle for us at that point in time, or for my family, I should say, and to some extent myself, is we each had kind of multiple projects that we were working in as well. And not unlike you guys, where when that's happening and multiple things are working, that can be a lot of fun, and there can be a lot of great synergies. And we were kind of in a spot where I still had a freelance consulting business that I was working on the side. I was working with my family. My mom has a property management business and spent some time there. I know that you guys know a little bit about that world as well. And so she and my stepfather were, we're working that business. And so we just sort of, I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was about 3.5 years ago now. And in November. And we sat down and we just said we can't continue to, pour money and resources into, this thing. And it was a tough decision in that we had employees and, team members, and there were real consequences to the decisions that we were making. Thankfully, we were able to find just about every one of those employees a position with one of the other companies or with a client.
Wow.
And so that was a really good, I was really proud of that. And proud of our executive team and kind of the way that we handled that. And so that made it a little bit less shameful. That made it a little bit easier to kind of walk away.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I mean, really, I'm just I'm kind of grateful that that happened that way. Some of them, it was more of a temporary spot for them, and then they eventually moved on from that. But it at least kind of cushioned that blow of we didn't have to come in one day and say, "Hey guys, we're closing tomorrow" or something really tough like that. I think the thing for us was we had been struggling and kind of grinding our gears for so long. And that, I remember the day after that, I didn't go into the office, we had already notified everybody, and I woke up and it was not the kind of thing that I would ever wish for again. But there was this calm of okay, that was the last chapter. And now we can close this. Now we can move on. And we had some, client obligations that we had to work through. And so we, thankfully we were kind of able to, keep some team members on that for a while. But it was in a way the best thing that ever could have happened. Because that business wasn't something that was ever going to be the sort of thing that we would love.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to make one more.
I don't want to cut you off in the middle of your thought.
No, it's all good. There's one more point there of it was to the point, and I think that this is a sort of lesson that I would love to kind of pass along for other family family businesses, family entrepreneurs that that may be or have been in that position. Is we let it go too far. We stayed in that struggle. To the detriment of our family relationships, where we were so stressed that we were snapping at each other and we were saying things that we didn't mean and that were not kind. And as I look back, it's completely understandable how that happens. Like that's not because any of us were, we're bad people, but when you're under that kind of pressure and you allow that to be the case for so long, we had a lot of warning signs that we didn't see, and sort of skipping ahead to the other side of that, right, is that there's this calm that kind of happens afterwards when you can see it for what it was. And see that it was this thing, it was this company, it was this experiment that we were trying. And just because it didn't work doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with us. It just means that this one thing didn't work. Yeah.
So I have so many thoughts. My first one though is honestly to commend you for putting this out there as one of your topics that you could talk about, and then for coming on and sharing that, because one of the biggest taboos that I see in the online business or even in just the world of entrepreneurs in general is that failure is something bad, and that failure, you shouldn't fail, you can't fail, and then when you do, you don't talk about it because, oh, heaven forbid someone knows you failed at something. But honestly, these are the stories that people need to because otherwise they don't know that out of the failure comes something new, comes something better. Failure is necessary to learn those important lessons of, oh, hey, we should check out those warning signs and maybe pay attention to them next time. Kind of having that vision of what's this business going to be, and then is there a point where we would say we don't want to do this anymore if this gets to a certain level of stress or, relationship tension? So, I commend you for being open and being vulnerable and sharing that story, because there aren't many people who have grown a company to how many? You said you had 50 employees at that peak of the company. That's a lot of people, and that's a very large company. And, I feel like people don't see that enough, and they just have this idea in their heads that successful businesses stay successful businesses when that's not true. Life happens in any business. Yeah. It doesn't matter what size. And especially in a family-run business, there's just so many cogs that are moving and trying to work with each other. And then as soon as one doesn't work, it kind of has that waterfall effect on the rest of the business.
Sure.
So, I love that you shared the story, and then I love the fact that coming out of it made you have that sense of calm and know that it was the right thing to do. Maybe not at the right time, but hey, late is better than never.
For sure.
And then I'm sure. So, what I want to know though is what lessons did you take out of that experience that then kind of helped you mold and shape what you're doing now? Because I think that's where the really good stuff is going to come out. For
sure. Yeah. So I think the biggest lesson is I'm kind of fond of a Buddhist phrase that, and I'm sure that I'm going to botch it a little bit, but it goes something like, when you're going through hell, don't stop. And I think that that's the biggest lesson that I sort of took away from that period of time was there were so many days where we were going months. When I say we, I mean my other family members and I, that were kind of managing the business, we went months and months without taking a single paycheck. We went, months of seeing that it wasn't working and kind of like hoping that something like was going to magically change, rather than kind of being clear on the things that we could control and then like choosing to focus just on those levers, and kind of stop the focus and the worry on all of the things that we couldn't control. And so I think that there's a difference between failing or identifying a business or a project as something that failed, and just kind of sitting in something that isn't working, because it's that sitting that is so incredibly painful. And I think that all of the bad things that happened, like all of the bad emotions, all of the bad, confrontations, they all came from that sitting in something that wasn't working, and that deterioration of being intentional about the things that we could control. So that's I think that's the biggest lesson.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I'm going to quote Tom here because he says this is his favorite quote about failure is fail fast and fail often, and then you move forward. And that's so true. I mean, if you can see that something is not working, you sure try a couple things and see if it helps. If it doesn't, don't keep trying and don't keep pushing and don't keep pushing, because like you said, you're going to end up sitting in that uncomfortable thing that's not working. It's going to start to affect the rest of your life. It's going to start to affect your relationships. Yeah. And it's going to start to affect you, your personal mindset, and, kind of how you're looking at things and how you're looking at life. And it's all a cycle that is just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse unless you look at it for what it is, accept that fact, and move on to the next thing. So how did you from kind of closing out that chapter, how did you get into what you're doing now from your previously you said just freelancing stuff?
I was, freelancing consulting projects and, with some kind of software development and some technology integration stuff mixed in. And it was sort of great because it was that kind of like, I always knew that as a freelancer, I could find additional jobs, I could go out to additional, businesses locally or, find businesses online. Once you've kind of had some sales conversations, you'll never go hungry again, because you can find somebody that needs some help and then just, find out what it is that they need. And so, it was that sort of I knew that I would be okay. And I kind of wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that I had a set of expertise. And so I just sort of, started to build off of the consulting engagements that I had, and reached out to a handful of small business owners locally, found some additional clients that that I could work with, over the World Wide Web that we have access to now, and through those, I was able to kind of clarify the way in which I sort of saw the future and the kinds of businesses and clients that I really wanted to help. One of the sort of principles that I took with me from that was I didn't want to build anything that was big and required all of those moving pieces. Like a big traditional kind of a company that had cubicles and computers. And people that required on the whole system to be functioning. I wanted to start something that was a lot more nimble. I wanted to pull together the tools and the tactics. One of the other parts that was especially valuable for me from that experience was about half the time in that company I was going all over the country. flying on site to newspapers, magazines, publishers, and working with them to update their internal systems too. And so I got this like huge amount of experience of how people reacted to and how they implemented change. And of course, as we know, because we're in the online the space, we're in like high tech industries, but of course we both have experience in more traditional companies as well. Is that change is the only constant. We're coming into an era where we're going to see all of the indicators point to faster growing change and faster moving, more disruption with with new technologies like AI and all of the various industries that's going to touch. We're going to see some pretty big changes that are going to alter the small business landscape. And so as I started to see more of that, I started to see my friends, my family members that all had small businesses. And I said, I want to be there with them, helping them so that they get to take advantage of these huge changes that are happening rather than falling victim to them.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. And I think I like the way that you talk about it too, is the innovation consultant. So not just a small business consultant or a business strategist, but that innovation and that change is what people usually need the most help with. Because you can learn how to do a lot of things on the internet these days, but it's learning what things you should be doing and how to implement them in your business to be successful. That is kind of the necessary part. So that is, I love that. And so you have a freebie that you wanted to share with everyone today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of came up with that and what it's about?
Absolutely. So over the course of the last year or so, as I started to kind of hone this vision from the clients that I was working with and the changes that I was helping with them, that I was helping them work through, I should say, I saw that there were a couple of kind of commonalities that just about all small businesses had or they struggled with. And those were a casual relationship with strategic planning. So, you guys are wonderful in that you actually share your process, and I've seen pictures of the whiteboards and the project, as they're going through your workflow there, which is so great. But most small businesses just don't know how to do that. They've come from an era, especially if they've been around for, like if they're a generation or two old. They've come from a place where they haven't had to make changes that quickly. They restock the store, once a season. Or they do those sorts of things, and that's their state of that's their pace of change. Yeah. And some of the other struggles that I saw were that they lacked that vision of how to be able to see, where they wanted to go with the business. I see a lot of multi-generational businesses where the new generation has a lot of great ideas, but they struggle to kind of define them in a way that allows the previous generation to fund them or to be comfortable with them.
Yeah.
And so I sort of wanted to kind of pull together all of my thoughts and my experiences in a book that would help small businesses to kind of to just start, just start to make these changes, to begin to define what they wanted and then to take imperfect action. So that they can, as Tom says, fail fast and, fail often, so that they can just start taking action with something that's defined. Yeah. And so it's a little bit of a strategic planning book that kind of combines a little bit of my story, and it provides some tools for small business owners to kind of cut through the distraction that is so prevalent today, as we have so many resources and pieces of content and people, talking heads. Not that this is one of those, right? But there are so many of them. That's right. That's right. But so like some tools to cut through that and to let those small business owners take action rather than just consuming content.
I love that. All right, so I'm going to share the link to grab that free PDF ebook down below. But before I do that, I want to ask you, so I know we talked about some of the lessons you've learned in, that whole, the family business ending and coming to a close, but is there any other piece of advice or lesson that you've learned like in your entire journey that you'd like to share with everyone or part with us today?
Sure. I think it's so hard to just pick one, isn't it?
It is. You can pick a couple, I guess.
I think the biggest thing that I would want to share is that it's so easy to stay small. It's so safe to stay small.
Mm-hmm.
But the size of need that's out there for people, just about no matter what they're doing, the need of the people to show up and be willing and vulnerable to give all they have is perhaps bigger now than it's ever been before. And so the biggest thing that I would kind of want to leave your viewers with is just don't stay small. Not small in terms of the size of your business. I'm talking about the size of yourself that you bring into situations. The world needs all of us to be bigger, so that we can help. I mean, not a day goes by when there's not some big emergency on the news or something, right? That makes us feel, it makes us feel fearful, and that makes us feel like we just want to like hug our kids and our nieces and nephews and our dogs. As I was talking to Ariana about before the show, like we just want to hug those that we love a little bit closer. But I think that it's those exact same, changing and scary times that, requires us to just show up and do as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I love that. So where can people find you, Tony, if they want to, follow you on social media, or if they want to check out your website and learn more about you?
Sure. So you can always check out our site at venturegreatly.com. That's the name of our consulting firm. And that's also where I blog on a consistent basis. Aside from that, you can find us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is Venture Greatly. And you can also find me personally. I'm always hanging out in the Family Entrepreneur Life group.
Yes.
It's one of my favorites. It's a great place to see some like-minded and wonderful people. So feel free to shoot me a message or start a conversation. I love chatting with just about anything. I love chatting with just about anyone about anything, I should say. So I look forward to seeing you guys there.
Yeah, and I know that Tony does lives from his Facebook page, so you guys should totally follow him there because he talks about some great stuff. And yeah, he's always in the Facebook group, and we love to have conversations. So if you aren't a member of the Family Entrepreneur Life community, make sure you check it out at familyentrepreneurlife.com. And then we'll also be posting the links. I got the link to Tony's book ready to go, and I will also post up the links to his Facebook page and his website in case you want to check them out. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for being open and being vulnerable and sharing your story with everyone. And I look forward to meeting up with you again more in the community and hearing about some of the great things you're doing.
Absolutely.
All right,
thanks
everyone.
so much, Ariana. It's been great to be here with you.
Thank you. And it's been an honor to have you on. Thank you all for watching this episode of Family Entrepreneur Life Live with our guest expert, Tony Banta. If you are watching the replay and something Tony said struck you and you want to leave a comment, please do. If you have questions for Tony or for myself and Tom, pop them in the comments and tag us, and we will be sure to come back and answer those. All right, Tony, thank you again for coming on, and that's our show for today. Bye, everyone.
See you guys soon.